So before we get started, I'd like to talk about something real quick. Unfortunately, that something is not Detective Pikachu. I'm sorry, guys. I just did not have the time to get to the theater this week. But anyways, we will be talking about the new evil hero. Evil Hero. Malicious Bane. Now, I'm going to tell you all right now, Evil Hero is probably the version of Hero I've experienced the least of over the years. Rather, it's because of their just general lack of relevance or my just general lack of interest. I don't know a ton about this archetype, but it doesn't take much looking at this card to figure out why it's actually really good, and I think exactly what a deck like this needs, and it's definitely something to help to be better hero support overall. So, what does this card do? Well, for starters, it's got that sweet 3K stat line. Always nice in a fusion deck. But essentially, its fusion materials are freaking great. It's only one evil hero and one level 5 or higher monster. That's it. For a very simple cost, you can summon this guy. And that's important because a lot of the hero extra deck monsters they've been making are either too gimmicky, or their summoning conditions are just kind of so out of left field and don't really work with what heroes can do that they're just virtually useless. This fits perfectly within the archetype. And the fact that it says evil hero monster instead of hero monster, I think is a nice way of keeping this card with its archetype, so you don't see another annoying Neo-Space Connector situation where now everything that uses warriors is using it. So then we move on to the effect. First up, it can only be special summon with Dark Fusion. That's my only gripe, because I wish this thing was a super poly target, because that would make the deck even more of a kind of the underdog, but I think it would be more fun. And then for its effect, first up, can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. In the lower tier casual local situation you're going to be seeing this thing, that's actually really good. It's very straightforward protection, but it's useful protection. Then we move on to the actual effect, and this thing is badass. Its effect is that you nuke your opponent's monsters, just get rid of all of them. Only hero monsters can attack after that, and also this thing gains 200 attack for each destroyed monster. That is awesome. For starters, it's not that hard to get heroes on the board when you don't need to waste your time going into bad link monsters. It's not that hard to use this thing in conjunction with maybe, say, Malicious or some other potential warrior engines you could splash in there, potentially Dark Grepher, Armageddon Knight, and then you just get to a few hero monsters, and then you just attack. Like, that's it. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's to the point. It's not gimmicky, it just does what it needs to do. Will this thing make Evil Hero like tier 0? By God, no. But this is kind of the support I'd rather get. Like, just something simple and it does what it's supposed to. That's all I want out of hero support at this point. So then moving on, we get into this week's episode. And, okay, let's just get right to the elephant in the room. And that is, I died for 5 minutes and then came right back. This was stupid. And, like, I'm not as angry as I normally would get at something like this, as this kind of big emotional cheat they did, and I feel like I should be more angry than I actually am. But the reason I'm not is, A, I'm actually very tired right now, but also another reason, well, also, I like I a lot, so more scenes with him is never a bad thing. But also, I'm curious to see what happens with the other Ignises next week. Because I said something very important when he came back. He said he had no clue if this backup program he made for himself would actually be able to maintain his consciousness. And if he came back, he might be a completely different person. That's kind of an interesting angle, and maybe a potential interesting little Easter egg they put in for what's to come. And I won't lie, that's got me curious. It is also interesting when I gets to the other Ignises. Now, obviously, the other Ignises know his abilities, and because obviously they have the same abilities, but they're saying, we can't come back from this. There's no saving us. We are gone. Like, we are going to die. And I is just like, no, there has to be the way. There has to be a way. And when you remember in your head that I keep surviving, you can sort of then, because they did this in Season 1 too, you thought he died, but he didn't. You can sort of infer a couple things from there. You can go the negative route and just say, well, we know he can come back. Surely he'll figure out a way to save all of them. But then you sit there and wonder, what if the idea is that they can't come back, and, like, that's what he can't stand? That, like, after all the effort he's put into his own preservation and trying to protect Cyber's world and all this and that, there just isn't anything he can do. Like, there's no way to save your friends. None of your bag of tricks will help you here. That's kind of a sad little way to go about it. And his reaction to them leaving is pretty tough too. Like, he's just very much like, no, there has to be a way, there has to be a way. Like, he can't accept what they all have. And that's sad, like, because Ai's a great character. So, that was pretty good. He then comes back out. I wish Yusaku was just like, Judge, slow playing. Like, the rules of whatever they're in just, like, shuts down the duel and Yusaku gets the match. That would be amazing. But no, then the duel continues, and Yusaku brings us our first Link 5. Well, first up, let's talk about the turn to get to that Link 5, because I loved every second of this. First up, Yusaku summoned Code Talker. Like, Code Talker is like a year-old promo. He's just getting to it now. But that's cool, and I like the fact, if I'm correct, that's a lot of what he used in this was the stuff from the shooting code structure deck that we haven't gotten yet for some reason. It was cool to see him use all that stuff, because Code Talkers was a deck people were kind of experimenting with when the stuff came out. It didn't go anywhere, because really, how could it? But the fact that it's stuff that actual people cared about and wanted to look into instead of just the usual brainless, uninteresting monsters Yusaku summons is a nice little touch, and I like that he did an actual strategy. Like, it wasn't just random shit and then storm access and then duel over. No, he actually had to build a board and just link up and climb up to the next monster like a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players actually do, and he did it in ways that made sense. He just kept adding monsters and adding monsters. I mean, one Droll and Lockbird and he would have been dead, but it was a nice little bit. I like that he got to the ritual. I like that he got to the Xyz. I like it was all a reasonable strategy when it all came together. This was a crazy convoluted situation. He needed to respond crazy with crazy. And then we get to our big Link 5, Firewall Dragon, Dark Rift, Fluid, Dark Fluid, weird name, and I want to like the fact that Firewall Dragon gets an upgrade. I really do, but it just feels so weird at this point. Like, even when XC Dragon showed up, I'm like, is this just so you can be like X's and O's? Like, it's just kind of out of nowhere. Like, he doesn't have any real attachment to Firewall Dragon. He barely uses it, so it's like, why does it just randomly get an upgrade? If anything, you'd think it would be a Code Talker. But it shows up, and it can't even be summoned with Firewall Dragon. Like, I'm like, look, I know obviously you can't make Firewall Dragon support because he's banned and never coming back, but I'm still kind of like, well, he's kind of an upgrade, kind of not, because this was how the Odd Eyes support worked. Like, the Odd Eyes support was stuff that could be splashed into all Pendulum decks, but the reason it was good, it worked as Odd Eyes upgrades, was that when you used it with the Odd Eyes strategy, you actually got a lot of advantage for the time. Now, obviously, Magician Pendulums kind of outclass it, but this was a very good reason to keep Odd Eyes a 3 of when all this stuff came out. But here, this doesn't really work with Firewall Dragon, so making it a Firewall Dragon upgrade type thing just kind of makes it feel weird more than anything else, which sucks, because I like everything else around this card. I like this idea that it's Firewall Dragon, but he's basically jacked up on steroids, bursting with power. That's kind of cool. And the effects. The effects of this thing are cheesy, they're ridiculous, they're over the top, but this feels like the kind of goofy nonsense that when it comes out in real world, it's just daring you to come up with some sort of nonsensical OTK strategy. I think someone already did. And so, yeah, and also, like, again, what Yusaku did to get to this monster actually made sense. Like, he had to counter a very powerful monster, so he had to set up a complicated strategy. He had to come up with something insane, and I think it felt like the right kind of payoff. This was what he had to do. He needed that loop to waste those counters. It's a reasonable strategy, and it makes sense. So all in all, I enjoyed all that. Last thing worth talking about, Bowman and I can't remember the brother's name. That was nice. I like that. I like that idea that, in a way, Bowman kind of had this extra sense of humanity to him. Like, in the end there, he didn't, like, when he goes out, first up, I like that he was respectful about it. Like, he was sort of, like, he practiced what he preached. That was nice. But as he's going out, that idea that the logical artificial intelligence had kind of this moment of spiritualism in a way, where he wanted to believe his computer program brother had a soul. He wanted to believe that there was something there and his brother would guide him to the afterlife. I don't know. I just think that's kind of a beautifully simplistic little thing that is done to death and everything, but in this context, it's kind of interesting. So all in all, there's that. And then last thing, the way the episode cuts to credits is weird. He's just like, at what cost? Preview. Everyone's fine. You know that's going to happen, but I think they just kind of got to the 25-minute mark and just sort of stopped. But yeah, all in all, that was this episode. I should probably be a little more annoyed than I should, especially at the stuff with but maybe it's because I actually watched this yesterday and have had time to lament. Maybe it's because I'm dead tired. But all in all, I kind of like where this whole thing went. It was interesting till the end, or at least a lot of it was, and I am really curious to see what's going to happen with the Ignises for next week. So that's that. As for the TCG question of the week, Orchist. I went up against them at a regional last weekend, and they were my hardest matchup in that I did not beat them once. Do you think this deck is potentially a big problem? Because as far as I can tell, if you don't have the Lancia, you're kind of just dead. So all in all, tell me about that below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me next week as we wonder the fate of the Ignises. Just watch, they'll be back next episode.